space, but I'll continue following the conversation in the background. Cheers, eh?
No, that's fine. Cheers. Hi, guys. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the Phenomenal Lighting Masterclass series online. My name is Mildred, the Lighting Bear from Zimbabwe. I'm a lighting designer. And with us tonight, my special guest, Michael Forster. He calls himself Spike. I don't know. I think he prefers to be called Spike, so I'll go with Spike. I'm just really excited to be conversing with such powerful man in the lighting industry. It's humbling and encouraging that he's even taking the time to talk to me. Thank you so much, Spike, for doing this. I really appreciate it. So Spike, a bit about Spike. Spike has been doing lighting for over 40 years now, and he works for a company called Delate International. Spike has worked in 26 states. I wrote it down somewhere. 26 states. He's done lighting in 16 countries. He's done lighting in 4 continents, but not in Africa, at least not yet. So when I asked him about which show was best, production or play, he says his answer is the next one is always the best. So this is just a bit about Spike. So Spike says he wants to talk about lighting in general instead of dwelling in the things that he's done in the past. So I would like to welcome you, Spike, this evening, and also just give you the floor to talk to us about lighting.
Thank you, Mildred. You will find that my Zoom connection will be lagged by, it sounds like 5 or 6 seconds at least, because I'm on the other side of the world from you. But that's okay. I wrote up a bunch of notes last night about, all kinds of things that I wanted to talk about, lots of, humorous stories from my childhood and who my teachers were and some of the things I've learned from them and all that. But I kind of realized that's just the way I went. I think you, Mildred in particular, and you, all the rest of you who do lighting or theater, will find your own way, and you will have your own teachers, and every now and then those stories will pop up, but you will, anyway, I'm not much of a public speaker, so I will probably ramble some. I hope to stay on topic. I started, let's see, how shall I do this? I think, well, we'll talk about history later. I think the most important thing about lighting and working in theater in general is, the note I wrote is cueing with the actor and then breathing with the actor. The process of making a dramatic shift in lighting, it kind of doesn't matter. I say this, I know that it's a lie, but I say this, that it doesn't matter what you do as long as you do it at the right time. I think that if you see something happening on stage that needs just a change of atmosphere or a change of emotion, if you follow that, if you're in touch with the actor, the dancer, the musician, whoever it is, and you do it with them, like here, I'll show you like the cue happens now, or you see somebody turn and there's the light. It's that kind of thing. The audience, we as people these days are used to seeing abstract things. Television is abstract, movies are abstract. It's not real life. Theater is real life, but the not real life part says that the audience will put the pieces together themselves. You don't have to tell them everything. The actors are doing that. But if you make a change, like think of Shakespeare back in the day, he did his shows in the middle of the afternoon with a crowd of people selling and yelling, and the only way you knew it was nighttime or daytime or whatever is what the actors said. So we have a bit of advantage, maybe, if you want to call it that. Maybe it's a backwards step, I don't know. But we can suggest darkness. We can suggest all kinds of, daylight, sunset, party, whatever, with lights, but it all has to be in support of what the actors are doing. And that's what I mean by breathing with the actors, with the action, so that you're in sync, I guess would be a way of saying it. There's lots of things, there's lots of techniques. I don't know if I want to go into them just yet. I'm thinking at the most simplest level, you want to be able to see the actors. And so if you, like what I said about you can do anything you want, just don't black out on the actors. Just don't, like make sure that the action is still visible. But anything else around it, if you change colors, if you change emphasis on the set, whatever, just make sure it's at the same time as when the actor is going through their emotion, their message. Let's see, what else there right here. A lot of times, like when I started, I started in college. There was, how would you say this? In the main theater at this college, we had maybe 20, 30 lights, maybe, about 18 channels of control. My first job in lighting had to do with the music department at this college. And every week they would do recitals, several recitals, sometimes bigger groups, sometimes orchestras. What that meant was the music shows were all in a single room. And so for several times a week, I would go in and change the light for a solo performer or a quartet or an orchestra or, you know, another solo performer and sometimes an opera. It was kind of like a laboratory, and I got to be good at focusing lights, moving lights around. I think for music people, this is a technique question. If you have sheet music that the musicians are working from, the sheet music needs to be lit. That's what you aim for. And that the musicians do not have to look into a light to see the conductor. So basically that means a lot of top light and some light on the conductor so that the musicians can see him or her. And otherwise just try to make a pretty picture. And that's what I did for a couple of years. Back in the day when you only have 10 or 15 lights or something, which is often the case in my experience. I should mention that I think the last talk in this series was with Patrick Woodruff,
Yes.
who's a big name in lighting in England. He worked with the Rolling Stones and with the Beijing Olympics and the London Olympics, where you have thousands of lights and probably a crew of hundreds,
Definitely.
and endless dollars flowing, and which is lovely. I wish, sometimes I wish I had that much capability, but usually I end up with 15 or 20 lights, and I get to, so you learn how to use those lights in a very simple way. Like sometimes all you can do is a blackout, but again, like if you do that blackout at exactly the right time, the audience you can send the message to the audience that this is the time to applaud, or this is the time to think about what you just saw, and then applaud if they want to. You can do that in musical theater, like at the end of a song, if it's not necessarily a blackout, but dip the lights, and that the audience goes, oh yeah, okay, that's my cue. Sometimes, again, back in the day, I didn't, like with just a few lights, sometimes you don't want to commit to a single color. Like sometimes it's a blue show, sometimes it's a red show, sometimes it's pink, sometimes it's yellow. And when you only have a few lights, maybe you can use one for blue, one for red, one for pink, and one for yellow, but I often just went with white light and tried to work with balance on stage. Sometimes the spotlight maybe it's a little brighter over here where the actor is, maybe it's a little brighter outside the window on the set or something. But that was back in the day. I am lucky at this point, and the world is lucky to have access to LED lights, which can change color on their own. And so all of a sudden, you don't have to have a light or a set of lights devoted to blue or a set of lights devoted to pink or whatever. You can just change those with the setting on the light board. And then more recently, moving lights, I've started working with them too. And it's not so much about disco or rock and roll. I would have loved to see what Patrick did with the Rolling Stones. You see big concerts and stuff with lights moving all over the place, and it's beautiful, but in a theatrical venue, it's more about, I don't know, I try not to be seen. I try to let the actors do the work and support them rather than have the audience watching the lights. I mean, I like it when the audience notices the lights, but usually it's really about the actor. I want the actor to be supported in whatever they're doing. So, like with moving lights, that just means that sometimes you don't need a specific light for every place on stage. You can move the light over there. You can make the change in real time. Sometimes you how do you say it? Sometimes you can follow the actor walking across the stage. Sometimes you have the lights move to a place just to change the focus. The beam of the light can turn to that chair or this, doorway or whatever. And I've found that has broadened my practice somewhat. I used to be sort of known for using just white light because I was afraid to commit, because there's often, unless it's a 2 or 3 cue show, I usually do 50, 70, 100 cues per show, it seems like. And to do that with a handful of 6 fixed lights, that's pretty hard. With a handful of moving lights and colored lights, LED lights, it starts to become easier. I don't want to prescribe that, because I think that being able to use those 6 fixed lights in a way that supports a play is probably more important than doing fantastic lighting effects, in my experience. And I think the thing that makes me think that has to do with every year we do a holiday show, Christmas, New Year's, Kwanzaa, I don't know if you guys do that, Hanukkah, solstice, whatever you know, it seems to be that there's a lot of official holidays at the end of, you know, December, January. We do a touring show around Northern California. It's mostly for elementary schools, community centers, sometimes some of the bigger theaters that we have here.
Okay.
But the when we're working in elementary schools, I tend to sit in the audience when I'm running lights or close to the audience. And the kids are right there. They're right there beside me, you know? And I sometimes I just watch them to see what they're reacting to see how the actors are playing off what the kids are reacting to, and how that informs what I'm doing with lights. And with this touring show, we take 10 or 12 lights along. They're LEDs. A couple of them are moving lights, some footlights, but it's really pretty simple. But you can still make that magic, I guess you would say, that you can see when the kids, you know, the kids, they scream with joy if it works. Sometimes they scream because they're afraid, because we have some scary clowns in our shows sometimes. Bob knows, heck, he's been in one of them. But that is the thing, you know, the lighting, I kind of fell into it. I didn't intend to do that. I have made choices over the years that extended my stay in theater. You know, like, yes, I want to work on that show, or yes, I want to work for that company. But I'm beginning to think that it's really about the creation of magic for the audience. If you can do it, it has to do with that timing thing. It has to do with focus and being in the moment. I know that's pretty kind of lame in terms of how you explain it. I mean, look where I'm sitting right now. It's, you know, I live in the woods. I live in the forest on a mountain. And that's, you know, because of the pandemic, the COVID-19, I don't think there's any theaters in the States anyway that are working. Like even the Rolling Stones can't tour. There's, I mean, we're hoping that it's all going to come back. And there's ways to get around that. A lot of those ways do not necessarily involve lighting. I mean, maybe it's street theater that's coming back. I don't know. And maybe you can do street theater at night, and so you will need light. Sorry? Yes, go ahead.
I was saying
maybe this is a good time to.
I was saying it would have to be an outdoor theater as well.
Yes. Outdoors is harder than indoor theater.
Definitely.
Because, I mean, theaters they already have the infrastructure. You know, you can hang a light there or over there or behind you or anywhere, and you have places to plug in the special effects, and there's a place for the audience to sit, and there's a place for the actors to change costumes. Outdoors, you have to make all that yourself, which can be done. It's just a lot more work. I like how this is sort of developing. I think, Mildred, if you want to ask some questions, and knowing that there will be a step or two, I don't know where we are in the time. Let's see what oh yeah, it's close. If you want to ask some questions, there will, it takes me a second to hear your question and then a second to respond, but Mildred?
Yes. So you spoke about how you started off when you were a kid. My first question would be, did you always know that you were, did you always know that you were a lighter, or it came up as you were growing up?
No, I did not always know. In that bio, which some of you may have read, my first role in the theater was 3 French Hens. Our school did the 12 Days of Christmas in front of all our parents and stuff, and I had a 3 on a piece of paper with some crayon colored chickens, and that was my role. And I was probably 7 or 6 or something. When in high school, we had a rock and roll band, and I was always the guy that set up the speakers and the microphones and ran the cables and the microphone cables and the power cables and all that stuff. And it wasn't until I got to college that I had volunteered for a show that I wanted to see because I wanted a ticket. I had no money and I wanted a ticket for this show. And the theater department just kind of, took my shoulder and said, let's go this way. And I never left. That was in 73 or so.
Wow.
And I made, like I said, I've made decisions to keep that going. But I never actively sought it. It just sort of found me. Maybe that's why I suggest that, your path is your path and you will find however you get there. The details of my path are maybe interesting, but not critical. They're not absolutely necessary. Anyway, go ahead. I would, if that answers your question, Mildred.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. So you said your first shows you had 20 lights. I assume those were Parkins. Were those Par 6/4s?
No, mostly they were Fresnels. I think you might call them profiles that you have. They were old and hot and hard to work. I never worked with Parkins very much. They were very much a rock and roll thing back in the day, but I mean, I have some. They're sort of half useful. You can use them for just a wash on the stage.
Yes.
I think Patrick mentioned something once. He was talking about maybe the next show you just take 12 Parkins and point them straight at the floor, straight down at the floor, and that's the design. Which I like that kind of idea. It's very simple. you let the actors do the work, and the lights will, you know, they'll find their own shadows and light as they work. Anyway, I like park hands. I don't use them very often because I don't know. I just don't have a lot. I have 4 of them.
Is it not control? I find that you can't control them a lot. You can't control the beam at all. It's just, unless maybe you get a narrow beam or a wide beam. I don't know. That's the only way that you can control the beam. Otherwise, it's all over the place. Great for a wash.
Yes, very
Great
true. But that, yes. But sometimes I want to look at that actor or that actor, you know. And sometimes that's an acting problem. You know, maybe that actor needs to speak up a little louder or something. But anyway, if you have other questions, go ahead.
Yeah, my last question, I think. So theater lighting and an artist and lighting designers, how can we work effectively together to bring out a great show from a theater perspective? Say you have like a concert and you have to use, like in my case, I use moving heads and the colored lights, the LEDs here and there. But mainly, if I'm in the theater, I'm still using the Par 64s, I'm using the Fresnels, I'm using the Strand moving, the follow spots. And it's a musical show, or it's an album launch or something like that. And you want to, so you're using the old lights, but you want to bring that magical effect, you know. What would you say would be the best thing to do to bring out a great show, and just working together between the artists and the lighting designer, using the...
Yes. I think the best thing to do is take time. I know that we don't all get to have time. Like some people have jobs that they work at during the day and they go to rehearsal at night and then go home and sleep and go back to the job in the morning. But if you have the time, that's key. It's like you start to notice where this actor goes. You start to notice what this actor is thinking. You get to talk with the director and, you know, get an idea of the overall picture. But the details in which you use this light or that light, or this lighting change or that change, comes from familiarity with the piece. I'm not sure how you would say that any differently. It's just like, it would be like a musician not having to look at the sheet music anymore, or the actor not having to look at the script anymore. It's all memorized. And you as a lighting designer, or I as a lighting designer, I try to get to the point where I know exactly, or at least the range of what's coming. And, you know, after doing this for 40 years, you start to get some techniques down to, you know, make a flickering campfire or thunder and lightning or whatever the effects are. But it's really about taking the time, in my opinion. I have been wrong before, and I will be wrong again, but that's what I like to do. Go ahead.
Okay. No, thank you. That's great. I think I'll leave this to the guys if they have questions. What's an I? Do you have any questions?
So not, no one has sent anything through the chat, but I see that there are a few people on who are in theater. We have some artists on. And so if anyone would like to ask about lighting to Spike, see Mike Spike. You have a new title now, Mike Spike. So if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat or to simply unmute yourself. You can let me know if you have a question. For now, I will ask a question. So I'm actually a spoken word artist, and when I'm on stage, I'm usually in the same spot. But as you were speaking about, you know, not doing anything specific, but doing it at the right time, I understood what you meant, because somehow as a lighting designer, you are also experiencing the show as it happens and you need to react to it. But what I would like to ask is, how do you manage reacting faster than the audience and knowing how to really bring out the effects? You know, like if you're in theater, or if you're watching a piece that you hadn't seen before, if something happens on stage that you hadn't experienced before, how do you manage that?
That's sort of where that time thing comes in, that I was talking with Mildred about, being familiar enough with the process of the show, with the actors, with how it's going. I have an advantage working at Del Arte for, I believe it's about 35 years only now. We've developed we have a kind of a language. You know, we can talk about a take, or upstage turn, or boy, I don't know, there's just a million things about directions, about how the moment goes, you know, the history of the prop, for instance. And that's a thing that comes from years of experience. If you have, sometimes you only get a week to work with this company or that show, or sometimes you only get a day. And yes, everything is a surprise. And that, I'm not sure how you would codify that, but maybe it's like dancing or something. Like, you don't know what your partner's going to do, but you stay open to it, and you know, go with it. And you know, you can make cues, and your partner can make cues, and the other people on the dance floor will make cues for you, and you just play off of that. That's all. That's when, like, improvisation works well. I don't know if that answers your question, Wadzi, but we'll move on from there. Maybe. Oh, here's the thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should say, it was one of the holiday shows back. Oh boy, back in early 90s, late 80s, I don't know, something like that, where all of us were in the band, the band for the holiday show. And we had band names. And that's where the name Spike came from. And it just stuck, you know. There was Spike and Red and Doll and Face and Sharky and I don't know, Troll. There was a bunch of us. We all had names that were, you know, the band names, and it just stuck with me. There's a couple others that have stuck. There's a friend of mine that lives in Calgary. Her name is Christine, but they call her Face, and people all over Calgary call her Face because she was in that band. Anyway, that's just a little bit of the history story. It's not necessarily a lighting story, but it's part of the history. Yes.
Yeah, so speaking to history as well, I have a question that's come in, and it just says from iPad, someone's name hasn't come up actually, and I can't see the person anymore, but then they dropped a question, and they're actually talking about the changes in lighting industry that you have seen over the 40 years that you've been working in the industry as well, like how it's evolving, and you know, where you see it going from where it is now.
I remember this college I started working at had 18 dimmers on a 2-scene preset light board. And when we got into like doing the opera or something, sometimes we would add another 6 to have 24 channels. That light board was about as big as a small piano. We did a touring show once with this 6 dimmer box that had, you know, 6 dimmers in it, and that box was about as big as, I don't know, a small refrigerator or a cooler, like you would take on a picnic with, you know, with beer and Coca-Cola and sandwiches for 3 or 4 friends. A box about that big. And that 6 dimmer box, you know, sometimes you could repatch, plug things in and unplug things. So sometimes you could, you know, change what that dimmer did. I did work on some of the old resistance dimmers that were these levers that, you know, and a bank of 8 or 10 of those was a physical workout. And they were hot. They're big resistors. But when I think the first indication of a more advanced light board I came to was a 5-scene preset of 60 channels. That was at a different college. And that was as big as a, you know, an upright piano at least. And, you know, you're madly changing presets. I worked at the university up here in Humboldt County. They had one of the early computer boards that would forget things regularly, like when the elevator went up and down in the building, the power surge would cause the computer to forget things. That has thankfully been fixed after a while. I think the computers now, I used to, well, I still say a lot of times I let the computer do the memorization of, channel 1 at 50 and channel 2 at 75 and channel 36 at, 80% or whatever. But I still like to take the cues manually, because I don't know, like, how long does this take? Is that 4 seconds? Is that 5 seconds? I don't know. After a while, you figure out that, yes, it is 4 or 5 seconds, and you can record it as that and just hit the go button. But I like for the computers to remember what what the setting was, so I don't have to write down a string of numbers. I mean, some of the light cues or some of the lighting setups with the 8 LEDs and a couple of moving lights, I mean, they're, for the last Christmas show, that was 165 or 168 something channels. Because the moving lights have, they take 14 lights each, or 14 channels each, and the LED, anyway, it all added up. And so that's a lot to keep track of in your mind. And computers are very handy for that. I mean, I could go back to a 2-scene preset if I had to, and I might have to. You never know.
It's easier, I think.
Does that answer that question?
Yes, you did. And we have another question that's actually coming in from Fungai. So, Fungai, you can just go ahead and ask the question now.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mike, my question to you is, in your profession, is there any room for improvisation? Especially in your setup where everything is scripted and has to be done to the T. Like, yeah, is there any room for that? Like, if something happens that's not in the script, how do you handle that situation as well?
There's very little. Let's see, how do I say this? Yes, if you're working on a script by Shakespeare, yes, there's words and a specific set of things that has to happen. When we're creating the shows that I usually work on, I usually start from an improvisational place. We call it a light over. It's not really a tech. It's just like the actors are rehearsing and I'll be changing the lights to see what works, or if any of it is good or bad or whatever. And after, some time, and that's again where the time thing comes in, you start to say, okay, this whole sequence is good. And if the actors or whoever drops a line, or if like one of the dancers can't make it tonight and we either have to skip an act or we have to skip a scene out of something, if you've had that time to where you know what the purpose, or not the purpose, but the flow of where the piece is going, then you can make that change improvisationally. It does not have to be set necessarily. I mean, every now and then, like if you and I have worked on this bit and we know that you know, you're going to turn that way at this moment in this part of the line, then I can, you know, I can support that, or I can get in the way of that, whatever it is we decide we want to do. But maybe you think for the next show, that's not what you want to do anymore. Maybe you want to do it another way. And I can, you know, and if we have time to talk about it, we can make that change before the show and try it in real time. But I don't think anything, I mean, you know, can you make plans anymore with the way the world is going? You know, you do what you can. You try to imagine all the possibilities, but when it comes down to it, you know, maybe we don't do this show, or maybe we do this show, but we have to do it in the back of a pickup truck instead of a theater, or you know, whatever. And you just have, I guess you always have to stay open to the possibilities. And it's good if you can talk with your partners about, okay, instead of entering from that door, you're going to jump up on the back of the pickup truck, you know, and you just make those changes in real time. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it makes for a very, very dynamic audience experience, because they see you working. They see you solving the problems in real time, you know. So yes, there's a lot of room for improvisation. If you have things worked out already, it's best to talk about, okay, I'm going to go this way instead of that way tonight. But you know, and I also, if like, I hate giving up a show. Like, what we do sometimes is design lights, and then we have an operator that just hits the go button for however many cues it is in the show, and I go away and do something else. I like to run lights for the whole run of a piece, you know, 3 weeks or 5 weeks or a weekend or whatever it is, because every night I find new, you know, I find new things, you know. Maybe it'll work better if we use that light instead of this one. Maybe it'll work better if the timing is fast going up and slow going down or something. There are things that I never have time to figure out exactly before a show opens. And so, yes, improvisation is a big part of, you know, and the show might look the same more or less at the end of the run, but the details, with any luck, have made it better. Anyway, thank you, Fungi.
And I'd like to ask you one last question before I hand back over to Mildred, which is, what advice you would give to the young lighting designers that are going to be seeing this conversation as well afterwards? Like, how can they be best prepared? Like, what kind of equipment can they start to secure, or what kind of skills do they need early on in their career to make sure that they're set up for, you know, like a good road in the career of being a lighting designer?
If I understand your question correctly, what kind of road to take? to become a good lighting designer, maybe. I think it really has to do with being friendly. Has you know, and working with your friends. I think you can go. I mean, I've taken a lighting class in college. Turns out I didn't take the class until I'd already had a fairly good bunch of experience in terms of, this is a Fresnel and this is a Par 64 and this is where the adjustment nuts are that make it do this or that, or how to change a lamp. I knew all that already, so I can't prescribe that for anybody. I think if you are if you are rich, you know, get whatever lights you can get and learn how to use them. If you're poor, which is like most of us, I think you take what you're given. Maybe it's like there was this group last year that at Delarte that did a piece about detectives trying to solve a crime, and it was lit with I don't know, 2 clip lights, you know, like the little lights that you attach to your door frame so you can see when you're working on the door frame. 2 clip lights and a footlight, and it was just beautiful. And flashlights too. It was just beautiful. It was gorgeous. They really did with my 30 moving lights and whatever, you know. I think you start with whatever you have, and just like just try to support the show, whether it's with 2 clip lights or whether it's with 1,000 moving lights. It has to do with actually just being present and friends with your partners, and you know, and you take your particular knowledge or desire to do lighting and use that. You know, somebody else is good at memorizing lines, somebody else is good at singing, and you're good at plugging a light into the wall, you know, and sometimes that's all it takes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Spike. I'm sure that everyone will appreciate that. I think actually what I can take from what you've said, which is similar to what Patrick said, is character, you know, like being friendly, and taking any opportunity that you get to work with the people around you, and to start with what
Yes.
you have and where you are. So I think those are like really 3 key ideas that are coming up in each of our conversations. And I think at this point, I'd like to give back the time to Mildred. If you have any more questions to ask, and you know, your final remarks before Spike also gives his final remarks, and then we can call it a wrap.
Okay. I have one more question for you, Spike. I was just wondering, do you do your own programming, or you have a team for that?
I'm sorry? Say that do I do my own programming?
Yeah, like
Is that what
recording
you said?
cues and recording cues and chases and stuff. Do you do that, or you have a team for that?
I usually do my own.
Okay.
Because of that that thing I did, I mentioned a light over, which is like lighting a rehearsal, or with, instead of being an official tech rehearsal, like sometimes we do official tech rehearsals. Most of the time I like to start at least, you know, it depends on the show, at least a week or a couple of weeks before we get into dress rehearsals, and just start throwing lights up, you know, see if there's holes in the light that you have to, you know, refocus to fill. See if you can add a light here to add something, or you can move a light or change the color. And I do all that in real time in rehearsal. And it would be hard to ask somebody else to just sit there and change. Can you give me channel 14 at 60% instead of 65? You know, I mean, I can do that. Sometimes you do need another person or two, like you have to, like the light board is in some room where you can't really see the stage from the audience point of view. And I find that hard to work with, but you know, we can. I mean, you know, please bring up channel 14 to 60%. But I find that to be slow, because like when I was talking with Fungi, is about, you know, you do things right now. You make changes right now. And if it looks good, then you can record it and it's done. And you also know how the steps were that you got there. If you need a team, well, I guess you need a team, but I don't work with that very often, I should say.
Okay. That's interesting. That's interesting. That would be my last question. And I just want to take this moment to thank you. Thank you so much for taking part in the masterclass series. And I hope that we get to host you again sometime. Yeah, I don't know if you have any last words for me and and the guys before we wrap up.
I don't know. I'm looking at my notes to see if I forgot to mention something. But not necessarily. I wrote a note down: light to illuminate the actor, shadow to illuminate the magic. That's cute. Sometimes it works. I don't know. You just kind of hope that you got a tap in the magic. And anyway, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mildred and Wadzi and Bob and whoever. I'm glad to have this opportunity. Thank you. Maybe someday I get to come to Zimbabwe.
We
I think
hope
you
to
should
come to Zimbabwe.
You should come to Zimbabwe. You haven't done lighting in Africa, so
I know.
Why not? Come to Zimbabwe. Let's do this.
I like that idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Spike. And thank you to everyone who came through. On behalf of the Phenomenal Lighting Tech team, I would like to say thanks. For our next, we're going to have our next class on the 6th of September, and we're going to be having Paula Constable, who is a lighting designer from the UK. She's a British lighting designer. And please have a look at her work online. And we're going to be having a conversation with her and meeting to discuss about lighting and everything. So we would like to see you there as well. If you'd like to come through, please follow the Phenomenal Lighting Solutions Facebook page. And we will also be sending you an email if you contacted us via email. So thank you so much for today. Our masterclass is finished now. And good night, good morning, wherever you are.
Good night, good morning.
Good night, good morning. When was that next one?
On the
September
6th.
6th?
Good night.
Yes, September 6th. We hope to see you all. And Frank says thank you. Gift says thank you. Everyone is sending a thank you through the chat. So thank you so much, Spike. And thank you to everyone who came through.
Thank you. Good night. Good morning, Spike.
Good night, good morning. It's been lovely. We'll talk again.
Bye.